So send those messages of support and we'll look at them a little bit later on in the show. So there's another full roster of sport action taking place this coming weekend. And like we normally do on a Friday, we chat to sports journalist and commentator Khanyiso Tshwaku to preview all the action for us. Khanyiso, so good to have you again. I've been quite excited about the the Proteas team, because initially they started out on shaky ground, but the last two wins have been decisive. Perhaps the top order hasn't worked and fired 100% as a unit, but there's been some big scoring. What have you made of the tournament thus far?
Good morning, Stacey, and good morning to the viewers. You'd rather get your game proper towards the back end of the tournament rather than the start. I mean, that 6-9 all out against England was an absolute abomination. But, I mean, they got it right against New Zealand. They got it right against New Zealand. And they got it spot on against India. What I found interesting has been the nature of the surfaces in India. It is early season pitches across Guwahati, across indoor, yet the manner in which they've aided spin has been quite amazing, but it's made for exciting cricket. I mean, if you should have seen the Colombo game between Pakistan and Australia, where Pakistan actually had Australia on the ropes. They needed a superb 100 from Beth Moon and another wonderful 50 from Alana King. And that set up the 221 on another day would be easily chaseable from a stronger side, but it proved to be more than sufficient for a team like Australia. But again, it just proves the unpredictability of World Cup tournaments, where you know that regardless of the difference between the sides, you'd feel that on a regular bilateral ODI between South Africa and India would generally get the better of South Africa. But when it truly mattered, I mean, South Africa has chased down 250 plus against India. They did so in the 2022 World Cup in Christchurch, but to do it in India, to do it from 81 for 5, again, it shows sometimes the values of old school cricket. A very good anchor knock from Laura Wolfhard, and then there was that very good knock from Chloe Tryon, and then Nadine de Klerk. Absolute pyrotechnics that took South Africa home. Yeah,
you're reminding me of two important things that sometimes perhaps we don't talk about enough, especially when you don't have the time, is the art and the science around the wicket. And then also you mentioned something that's so important, is that India are not just the co-hosts, they're the favorites as well. So a lot of psychological antics there. Let's move along swiftly though. Amajita, they came up short against Colombia. We're talking football now, and the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. I was a bit concerned because I know that initially, if we look at their AFCON performance, they started off slow with a loss and then things started to tick over. So this loss and coming up short against Colombia is a slight concern for me. Am I right or am I wrong? What are you thinking?
Look, Colombia were by far the better side. Yes, Amajita did have the opportunities that they didn't convert. But the 3-1 scored on is probably reflective of the difference between the sides. I wouldn't say it's a gulf. Because the Amajita actually did play well enough to get themselves into that position. But I do think that when it came to the quality of the team that they faced in the Colombian team, they were slightly outmatched. So look, I mean, the fact that they made the playoff stages, the one thing I've also learned through these age group teams is not necessarily how well they play these age group sides, but the important part is how do they then convert into senior teams. I think it would be very interesting to see how these players now convert as senior players, number one, and whether to just check up on what the 2028 Olympic qualification looks like, because ideally you want to see a progression of these players from under 20 through to under 23. And then from that under 23 level, they then move through to seniors. But I mean, if you look at them, Fundo Villagaz, for example, Fundo Villagaz is a significant player. Ukano Lekhaku, also for Asoko Tiwan. Those are significant players for Kaizer Chiefs and Mamelodi Sundowns, respectively. So I think it becomes very important to see what the career progression was. I mean, we did have a very good group of under 20s in 2009 that actually got through the playoff stage. But that particular group I felt was not well managed from that particular step onwards. But I think when you look at what Hugo Boss does with the younger players, I mean, he's very good and very happy at giving them opportunities. I mean, if you look at Mbeke Zilimbokazi, ideally should have been at the tournament, but
yes,
well, he was required for national team duties.
And of course, Mofokeng also out with injury. But talking about this progression to the senior team, let's take that as our move and our segue into what's happening later on today. And then, of course, come Tuesday, I saw comments comments from Hugo saying that, if they don't win today, we should forget about the World Cup. It's decisive. Zimbabwe obviously shouldn't be overlooked as well.
Correct. One of the things about Coach Hugo Bros is that he's very clear, very decisive in his messaging. 14 points, Bafana. They've been on 14 points. So already you look at that particular scheme, when you read the point scheme, and you realize that it is impossible to drop points at this point in time.
Yeah.
Look at Nigeria. They're on 11 points. They don't get maximum points today. They even rule themselves out of actually getting into that second place, because if you look at the points that teams have at second place, I think 4 of those teams have 18 points already. So Nigeria on 11, they can only finish on 17. The only teams that can finish on 18 and above are Bafana and Benin. And remember that about Nigeria has Benin in the last game. So the game that's going to be taking place in Polokwane today between Lesotho and Nigeria is of absolute importance, not just for Bafana, but for Nigeria. Anything gets the maximum points, they're sitting out a second World Cup. Anything gets the maximum points for Bafana, they'll probably be handing Benin the advantage. So it is probably the most important game. When we look at Tuesday and say, is that Bafana's most important World Cup qualifier since 2001? No, it is today's game. They win, they move 17 points, and it takes the qualifiers on Tuesday to the absolute last final round.
I hear you. I have to wrap it there. I still wanted to talk about rugby, but perhaps we can find another gap for that. Thank you for chatting to us. Khanyiso Tshwaku is a sports analyst and commentator.